And so try to just look at a deeper layer than just the claim on the package and really think through, what is the company trying to tell me by putting this claim on the package? And what do I want to glean from it?
Hey everyone, welcome to the Nourished and Thriving Show. I'm your host, Katie Lovett. I'm a registered dietitian on a mission to help you increase your impact and legacy on the world while healing your gut and reducing your IBS symptoms. I'm so grateful to have you here. Each week, I'll inspire you to live vibrantly and provide valuable resources and information that empowers you to take bold action towards your health goals. Before we dive in, make sure you follow or subscribe to my show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. Ready? Let's go!
All right, guys, today's episode was actually inspired by a conversation that I recently had with a friend, and it's actually one of the biggest areas of confusion that I hear out there. And it's, how in the world do I read a food label? Or maybe you think you know how to read a food label and you're actually not looking at it the right way, or you're misunderstanding, or you're misinformed on what to look for. So this is actually a whole section in my resource library of my signature program, Gut Rehab. But I wanted to share some of the information with you today because I think it'll be really helpful. And I come with a really different, unique, interesting perspective when it comes to food labeling, even different than other dietitians. And that is the truth. That is because of the fact that I'm speaking from personal experience. So for those of you guys who don't know, I actually worked in the food industry for over 5 years, and my main job was labeling food. So I know the regulations in and out. I know how companies are calculating the nutrition facts panels, how they're writing the ingredient statement, what the claims mean and what they don't mean. So I have a lot of really unique insight to be able to share with you guys on this topic. So we're going to cut through all the muck, cut through all of the confusing areas, and get into it. So first of all, we all know that the most health promoting foods are those that don't really come in a package, right? They don't have an ingredient statement. They have one ingredient, right? Fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, even like grass-fed, pasture-raised animal products, so meat, chicken, eggs, that kind of thing. But the fact of life, the truth is, packaged foods are just part of it for most people, right? And that's not necessarily an all bad thing. But I am going to say, I do not believe that packaged foods should make up the bulk of your diet. Okay? But we know that sometimes there is a time and a place for them. And so you need to know what you're looking at whenever those times come. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about 3 main parts of the food package. And again, this is part of my gut rehab program, and I have slides and visuals. So you're just going to I'm going to try and help you visualize it as best as I can. I've actually also done a free webinar on this before. Maybe I should bring that back if I get enough interest. If you guys want to know even more, go even deeper on this, let me know, and maybe we can revisit doing a free webinar where I teach you guys this. I also combined it with a meal planning, meal plan like a pro type of deal. So we looked at how's food labeled, how am I meal planning, what am I shopping for, all of that. Let me know if that's interesting to you. So the 3 main parts of the food label that we're going to talk about today are the nutrition facts panel, and that's probably what most of you guys are looking at, if you're turning the bag around, the ingredient statement, and claims, okay? And claims are probably what catch your eye first. I'm going to tell you guys how I look at those 3 pieces of information, because I do consider all of them, but maybe through a different lens than you as a consumer would, because I kind of know what's gone in behind that information. So let's start off first with the nutrition facts panel. So this gets updated every once in a while. So you may notice some changes. So sometimes, like more recently, the calories were made larger, stuff like that. But, generally it's going to be, very similar information unless it gets a huge overhaul, which is unlikely because that would be a really big adjustment for consumers to be able to understand and reconcile. And so it's very unlikely that one major change is going to be made all at once. The government actually looked at doing this probably back in like 2010, 2015, somewhere in there. And they had like several different versions that they were considering changing to. And, that's whenever they came out with kind of what we have now with like the larger calories, all of that, because they just don't want it to be such a huge change that consumers don't know what they're looking for anymore. So the biggest, honestly, I don't think the nutrition facts panel is all that helpful or important, to be really honest, unless you're like, diabetic on insulin and need to know how many grams of carbohydrates so that you know how many units of insulin to dose yourself with, that kind of thing, it's very helpful for. But if you're just like, Susie out there trying to improve your health, the nutrition facts panel, like, it's okay. I think it's a really great way to, at a quick glance, get an idea of what you're looking at. But I don't think, I'm not a proponent of counting calories or counting fat grams or anything like that. It just doesn't work long term. We've seen that time and time again. But it can give you a really quick overview of kind of what the food is like. So one area that I do think is important is the servings per container. A lot of especially like they're kind of in the middle. So they're not necessarily a single serving package, but they're not the huge, like, so chips here or crackers, especially like the snack foods. Okay. It's not necessarily going to be small enough to be a single serving, but it's not like an obvious family size multiple serving package. It's kind of in between. And it may not look completely unreasonable to eat it in one setting. And so you may be kind of shocked by how much you're actually eating whenever you look at the nutrition facts panel, if that makes sense. So you may be holding a bag of crackers and you're like, oh yeah, this is one serving. It's a single serving of crackers. But then you turn it over and you're like, oh, there's actually 4 servings of crackers in here. And you can do with that what you want, right? Like you can eat all 4 servings. That's fine if that's what you're going to do. But, if you're really wanting to watch, what you're eating or tracking macros or anything like that, which again, I don't super advocate for because it's just really confusing, but it's important information to know. It can be helpful. And then also the other one that I really look at is sugar. We know that sugar just doesn't have a lot of any nutritive value and it can be pro-inflammatory and we're almost all eating too much. So we are all working to reduce sugar for the most part. I think now, like, we're all on that page, right? I think we've all been like talking about that for a long time now. So this is important even to look at something, especially if you don't think of it as being a sweet, sugary food, right? So if it's something like cookies, it's obviously going to have sugar. But if it's something like tomato sauce or ketchup, especially like those tomato products tend to have sugar added to help counteract the tartness of the tomatoes, and you may not even realize it. So just looking at that sugar, and then underneath total sugar is an added sugar line. So that just helps you know, okay, well, what sugar is specifically being added in the form of sugar or dextrose, and what is being added that's just part of the food, right? So if you have, I don't know why I'm thinking of dates. Okay. And I'll tell you guys why I have this example. So we add a date to our smoothie or, to our like nut milk that we're making and stuff. And someone gave us a bag of chopped dates that they had bought for themselves and weren't going to use them. And so I was looking at it and not surprised. I was kind of expecting it because I know about, food processing, but the dates that were chopped were not just dates. So on our dates that we have that are whole dates, it's just dates on the ingredient statement. I turn it around, I turn the bag of chopped dates around, and again, it just says chopped dates on the front, right? So unless you really know to look for this, you may not know or realize that it's something that, is going on. And it had the total sugars, which was actually about the same amount. It was like 28 or 29 grams of added sugar, which is more than the recommended amount for the entire day. But that was the same as in 2 or 3 dates, whole dates, which if you've ever tried to eat dates, you know that eating 2 or 3 dates in one setting would be really difficult because they are so sweet. If you're a pregnant woman or have been pregnant and have been trying to have a more natural childbirth, there's a chance you may have tried to eat 6 dates a day because there was this study done that showed that women who had 6 dates a day had an easier labor. And so if you've ever tried to do that, you know that they're very sweet. So it had about the same amount of total sugar, but then underneath it in the chopped dates, it was 8 or 9 grams of added sugar. And then you look at the ingredient statements, and the first ingredient is date. And then the second one is dextrose, which is another word for sugar. So they had chopped the dates, but then coated them in dextrose. And you guys, I did try one just to see. They tasted like straight sugar. It was nuts. You couldn't even taste any of the date. So the total sugar is something just like what I did there, where it's like, okay, if I see total sugar, if I see added sugar, I go straight to the ingredient statement and start looking for, okay, where is that sugar coming from? Are they adding sugar to it? What is it looking like? And then you can make your decision from there if you want to still eat the food or not. Or if you're at the store and you're doing this, you can decide if you want to purchase that product or if you want to purchase something else. So, and that's just something that you, the consumer, gets to decide. That is in your wheelhouse and your power to get to just decide that. But you need this information to be able to do that. So that's the nutrition facts panel. Again, I don't think it's super helpful. I'm not going to get into all of the why, but calorie counting, all of that stuff, it just doesn't really work to help with weight reduction. That's why most people are looking at calories. We know that healthy fats are actually beneficial for health, so looking at total fat isn't that helpful. The ingredient statement is really where the meat of the information is in the product. So there's a lot to unpack in the ingredient statement, and for time purposes here, I don't have time to go through every single bit, but I'm going to just tell you the basics. I can't tell you every single ingredient that I, think is a great decision, every single ingredient that I would encourage you to avoid if you're in pursuit of better health. Again, I go into a lot of depth in this in my course. I've done webinars on it. So if this is something that you're interested in learning even more about, let me know, and we can talk about kind of how to make that happen. But in the ingredient statement, so ingredients are actually listed out by percent weight of the by percent of the formulation. So whenever I worked at my company, the regulatory group, they were the ones that wrote the food package. I was part of that group. We were some of the only ones in the entire company who actually got to see the product formulation because it's proprietary. That means it's like a trade secret, right? So we had the weight, I keep saying weight, not weight. We had the percent of the formulation. So we know it's, let me think of something that's like a pretty simple food here. Probably should have come up with an idea first. Let's just do like a trail mix. Let's do some nuts. That's easy, and that's not something that I'm going to get bothered by percentages. So it starts with the highest percentage of ingredients first. So whatever ingredient has the most percentage in the formula is going to be listed first, and it goes in descending order. And then once it gets to about 2% of the formulation, you can say less than 2% of the following, and then it's just all it can be mixed together. It may continue to go in descending order. There's some variability, right? Like once you get down to 2% of the formula, it's really challenging to maintain that precision of the formulation. If you've ever baked or cooked, you know that. It is really difficult to get exact numbers. It goes in descending order. So say you're buying this trail mix and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get some really great healthy fats and some fiber and some, protein in this nut mix. You look at the ingredient statement, and let's just say, for example, the very first ingredient is like M&Ms, like candy coated chocolates. Well, you know that this trail mix that you're looking at purchasing is actually more candy than it is nuts. So then you can decide, okay, do I want to, purchase this, or do I want to purchase something else? You may turn it over and see that the very first ingredient is almonds, and you don't love almonds as much as you love cashews, and you thought you were buying more of a cashew mix with just a few almonds, but the almonds are like super in there as the first ingredient, and you may decide, well, I'm going to go with just plain cashews because I don't want this like mostly almond mix. So it can be helpful in preference, but it can also be helpful in health. So that's the ingredient statement, and it just goes from increasing to decreasing order. The only things not required to be broken out in the ingredient statement are natural and artificial flavors and herbs and spices. Now, these are not required to be broken out because they are proprietary. They are trade secrets. So it's like grandma's secret, spice blend for her, banana bread. She's not going to share that with just anyone. It gives these companies a little bit of ability to have some secrecy so that their product can remain unique. The only times that they are required to disclose what flavors, herbs, or spices are in the product are a few. So if there is a major allergen in those, they have to list it out in the ingredient statement as well as in the contains allergen statement underneath the ingredient statement. Okay, so if there's an allergen in the flavoring, in the herb, in the spices, they have to disclose that. If there is the name of that ingredient in the name of the product, they have to disclose it. So say you're buying vanilla kettle corn. I don't know why I just came up with that, but I did. You're buying vanilla kettle corn, and there is vanilla extract in the product, but there's also artificial vanilla flavor. The company would be required to list that artificial vanilla flavor, and it's mostly going to be a parenthetical. So especially if they have multiple flavors. So if they just have artificial vanilla flavor, they'll probably list that by itself. But if they have several other flavors in there as well that are not part of the name, it's probably going to read like natural and artificial flavors, and then they're going to do a parenthetical including artificial vanilla flavor to let you know, like, hey, some of this vanilla in the vanilla kettle corn is coming from artificial vanilla flavor. And then the other time that they would have to disclose those flavors, herbs, and spices is if they have pictures of it on the product, on the packaging. So let's just say you are doing a yogurt and it is that's not a very good example. I'm going to stick with chips because I feel like it's easier because there's a lot of flavorings. And I used to do chips, so that's what I used to label. So say you have a sour cream and onion potato chip. Okay, and on the front, they have a little bowl with a spoon and this dollop of sour cream that looks delicious and some green onions sprinkled on top of the sour cream. Maybe you see some little dried green onions on top of the potato chips that are on the front of the package. You guys kind of know what I'm talking about. And so on the back, the sour cream would be listed out as its own ingredient, most likely if it's real sour cream. It's also an allergen because it has dairy, so it'd have to be listed for that reason. But say they had sour cream flavor, they would have to list that out just like they did the artificial vanilla flavor for the kettle corn. But they would also have to list the green onion under herbs. So they would either just list it by itself, or if there's other herbs and spices in there, they would do the parenthetical breakout just like that artificial vanilla flavor. Let me know if that makes sense. I know that can get really complicated. Like I said, I had to read the regulations. I went to a regulation course to understand how to do this, and I did it for 5 years. It's not that hard to grasp once you get it. but there are some nuances that can be confusing or feel confusing or like a lot. So that's nutrition facts and ingredient statements. We're going to move into the third part of the packaging that I think is really important. It's probably going to be the part that catches your eye first. It's probably going to be the part that really pushes you to purchase the product a lot because it's heavily marketing influenced. But it's a really great piece of information, and that is the claims on the package. But before we really dive into that, if you enjoy this podcast, if it's helped you in some way, I would really appreciate it if you pause the show right now and go give me a quick 5-star rating and review. It really helps me so much. It helps my show so much. I'm so grateful for your support and for you helping me to share this information and get it into the ears and eyes of more listeners. So thank you. Now that you've done that, let's get into claims. So claims are really controversial and for good reason. They're really confusing, and I think that as an average consumer, this is maybe the most confusing part of a food package. I've even gotten duped by it, you guys, recently in the past few years, because I didn't follow my step 2. I just purchased based off of the claim, which I highly encourage you to never do. So most claims are not regulated. Most claims are totally made up by the companies to sell the product. Now, they have to be careful, though, to not be misleading. And so it's a really, really gray area. So whenever I worked in food labeling, I worked with the legal department and the marketing department a lot because we needed to know from a legal perspective, is it, misleading or potentially confusing in any way? And it sometimes I think the marketing, parts of companies, they want to sell the product, right? And so I don't think that they have bad intentions or harmful intentions, but they may end up being a little bit misleading. And so the legal department, it's their job to really look at it from different perspectives and angles. And then the regulatory department weighs in with there's actually regulation around this claim and this is what it says, or this is actually not regulated and it's just how risky or not risky or misleading is it or not misleading. And then, ultimately it's the marketing and the company's decision to decide if they want to put a claim on a package or not. So claims that are regulated, the biggest one is going to be organic. So any sort of an organic certification where it has the little organic USDA organic seal is regulated. Most of the time, companies they hire a third-party agency to help them get certified. So I actually implemented an organic program for some new products that the company that I worked with previously came out with. So I actually got to walk through this this process of making the products. So it's really strict. They want to know where the products are coming from. They all have to have, organic certifications. And then it even goes into the manufacturing and processing of it, where they have to be kept separately from non-organic ingredients, all of that. So if you see a USDA organic claim on a package, know that unless the company is illegally putting that claim on the package, which is highly unlikely, that it has met the standards of organic certification. Now, whether you believe those organic standards are doing enough, whether you agree with them or not, that is your decision. But from a claim perspective, if they have the claim, they meet the organic certification standards. So that is one. Gluten-free is another one that is regulated. And that was, I think in 2010 that became a regulation. And the regulation, again, you may or may not agree that it's enough, but it's what companies are being held to. And that is that there are less than 20 parts per million of gluten per serving of the product. So that's another instance where looking at the number of servings per container can be really helpful. So if you have celiac disease where you're having to completely avoid gluten, that claim is likely not enough for you. But if you are just, watching to reduce gluten, if you have an intolerance or a sensitivity, something like that, then that claim, may be helpful for you. The reason it's not completely gluten-free is these food companies manufacture so much food, that you would have to have completely dedicated manufacturing facilities, and most of them just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So again, whether you believe that that claim is enough for you or not, that's, up to you and your personal decision, but that's what the claim means. A lot of other claims don't mean anything. They are whatever the company made up. They are whatever the company views to provide to their consumers. So natural was a huge one that is confusing because, natural could be, I literally went out and picked it from my garden. That's technically what fresh means. Completely unprocessed. I think actually once you even cut it, slice the watermelon open, slice the onion, it's considered processed. So it's where do you draw that line with that definition? And so natural really doesn't mean anything. And this goes for personal care products too, which we're not really talking about. That is super wild west, personal care products. Maybe we should do another episode on that. But, natural doesn't really mean anything. A big one that I want you guys to really be aware of is no added sugar or made without sugar, sugar-free. That's where I got duped. I just bought ketchup that said no sugar added. I typically know if something says sugar-free, it has a sugar substitute added, like an artificial sweetener. But no sugar added, I just kind of grabbed it thinking, oh great, no sugar added. But they had added artificial sweeteners to this ketchup, even though it said no sugar added. So that's where you see a claim, and it may be a great just entryway of what products am I looking at. So, okay, I know most ketchup has sugar. So no sugar added. I'm going to take a look at the back of that product and then see what is in it. So it can help you quickly weed through a bunch of different products whenever you're looking for something specifically, but then you need to investigate further. So if I see a claim on a package, I'm like, this may be a good contender because obviously this company is appealing to people who are health conscious. And so I'm going to turn the package over and see what is actually in it. And so that's kind of how I go about using claims. And that goes for anything. Know that whenever a company is using a claim on a package, they are working to appeal to that audience that claim will appeal to. And so try to just look at a deeper layer than just the claim on the package and really think through, what is the company trying to tell me by putting this claim on the package? And what do I want to glean from it? So if you're looking at a food and it says more delicious than ever, they're probably adding things to it to make it more delicious than ever, which may not be super health promoting, right? But if it's a, no sugar added claim, you may turn it over and be like, oh, it's fine. It actually, they stopped adding sugar to this. There's no artificial sweeteners in it. So it's a good option for me. So I hope that that's helpful for you guys. And then I do want to say one other thing about food, about packaged food. A lot of the time people think that big food companies are all bad and the worst, and that they'd rather buy from these smaller mom and pop, food companies. And there's just a couple of things I want to say about that. That's all fine and good. Make sure you know where your food's coming from. Research. A lot of big companies own a lot of different brands. So you may be buying what you think is a smaller brand name product, and it's actually just owned by this big conglomerate. So really reach it, dig into who's the owner of this, all of that, if that's something you care about and is important to you. But don't just pay extra money for something that's the same product, just has a different package on it. And also, sometimes you're actually safer purchasing from the big companies. Now, hear me out on that, because a lot of people may be throwing shade my way whenever they hear that. But those big companies, they're worth a lot of money. And yeah, they are after a lot of money and they want to make a profit. But they have bigger targets on their back. So they have bigger targets for lawsuits. They have bigger targets for litigation to come against them. And they have the resources and funding to have regulatory departments and have legal departments. And they are typically making sure that things are done well. That's my experience, at least in the food industry. They're actually going to be taking fewer risks and being less misleading with their packaging than a smaller startup company that may not be as knowledgeable about regulations or claims or anything like that, that's just trying to sell a really awesome product, if that makes sense. So that's just a couple of thoughts on big companies versus smaller ones. Some of you guys may disagree. You may think, big companies are just the worst, and that's okay. But if you hadn't really thought about it like that before, it may be really helpful as you're looking for products. So I hope this was helpful. I know it's a little bit longer than normal, but that gives you guys just the basic gist of food packaging. So claims draw you in, dig deeper to the second layer. Why can't I talk today? Ingredient statements are like the meat of the food package, and the nutrition facts, take it or leave it, but it can be helpful at a cursory glance. If this is helpful and you want to learn more about food labeling, more about meal planning, more about gut health, what to do, reach out. I'd love to talk with you about gut rehab and help get you some help.
Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. I hope you are feeling inspired and empowered to take bold action towards your health goals. If you enjoy what you heard, don't forget to follow my show so you never miss a new episode. And it would mean the world to me if you left me a review so others knew what to expect from my show. Last, get in touch. Let me know what bold action you're taking. Let me know how you're inspired. Follow me on Instagram at the_healthygut_dietitian. I've put a link in my show notes for you so you can simply click and follow. Come say hi. I respond to all my messages and I can't wait to get in touch.